Hi guys, welcome back. Today's video is going to be a pretty long one, and that's because it's going to be a pretty extensive care guide for Nepenthes or tropical pitcher plants, along with a repotting tutorial and all that good stuff. So stay tuned if you're interested. Alright, so first things first, this is our plant. This is Nepenthes thorelii by Aristolochoides. Let's see if I can get the tag. Focus. Here you go. Yeah, this is one that I picked up at my local garden center. Got a pretty good price on it, but it's just like, right now it's just kind of in this peat mix, and I don't really like that, so that's why we're gonna be repotting this one. So it says it's an intermediate hybrid, which is good. It just means it can take whatever conditions you really give it. But regardless, it is a Nepenthes, and I just don't like peat mix for Nepenthes. I'll show you what we're going to be using. So this is just like a bark mix. It's got like medium bark, and then it's got some perlite in there just for some drainage. There's some little pieces of sphagnum moss as well, but that was kind of an accident. And then this is going to be the bulk of the mix. It's just good quality long fiber sphagnum moss. This is what Nepenthes really like. It retains a lot of moisture, and that's what's going to make them happy. But the bark and the perlite just kind of counteract that and make sure that there's drainage, because they don't like to have like a stagnant conditions. They don't want to just be sitting in pure wet sphagnum moss, because their roots will not like that. So all right, let's get to it. So this one, it kind of looked like, yeah, it looks like it's two separate plants. So I'm just gonna be really careful and try and unpot this. Just squeeze the pot a little bit. There we go. Okay, so old pot. Okay, so I'm not sure what's going on here. Okay, so it looks like it actually has or had an extensive root system. So we're just gonna get out all this old media. And Nepenthes actually do have really fragile roots, so you want to be careful if you're actually repotting with me. Their roots are actually very fine and easily damaged, so this is actually a pretty important step. You want to make sure once you find a root, number one, identify if it's alive or dead, but once you find a root, be really delicate with it. Don't be like manhandling your Nepenthes. I know they're carnivorous plants, but they're really kind of delicate. So right now I'm just trying to get all the old media out really quick. And like I suspected, it does look like this is two separate plants. They probably just rerooted whatever basal shoots kind of appeared. That's what it looks like. It looks like this was one big main vine, and then they rooted this basal that was sprouting. So it looks like this is going to be one plant. There's a little root system on it. It looks like most of the roots have rotted off just in the care of the garden center, but I can work with that. That'll be fine. So there's one plant. And then this looks a little bit better. This looks like it probably was the main shoot at one point, the main vine. And then it was just cut back to leave us with this. And I'm just gonna clean these up really quick, and I'll be right back. Alright, so now that our plants are cleaned up a little bit, it's time to decide what size pot to put them in and what kind of pot to put them in, because Nepenthes are normally either just put on a shelf, or they're very often put in a hanging basket because their pitcher tendrils can be extremely long and like hang over the side of the pot. Now for this one, because most of its roots have kind of died off and it doesn't have an extensive root system anymore, and the fact that it's already kind of tall in a sense, like this one, I think I might just put it back into the pot that it was in, which was actually a hanging pot, just because I'm gonna have more options placement-wise in the greenhouse. So I guess we will just get right to it then. So
I'm just gonna kind of figure out what way I want to arrange these. So this crown looks like it has quite a few different starts, maybe two main ones and then a smaller one coming on. And then this one looks like it's probably 2 or 3 different crowns. So I'm just going to try and make it like a tier, like this, just so that I have a really good view of all of them. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess if I try and put them all together. So because this one's short, I'm just going to try and line up their bases again. And then just find a good, I don't know, this seems like a good open area right here. Right get them to fit together. Alright, so just like that. Looks like that's how they're going to be potted together. See how it gives me the two different heights? Just like better access if I need to do any pruning or anything.
So yeah, we're just gonna take our little pot, get out any extra media, and then I'm just gonna kind of throw in some moss. Just give it a good bed to sit on. Something like that. And then throw in some bark and perlite, kind of mix it up a little bit. There we go. Doesn't have to be perfect. These plants aren't extremely picky. All right, something like that. And then gently set the plant inside. And then for these, the height for this one as to where to pot it might be a little bit tricky because I don't want this stem to rot if it's gonna be sitting in wet sphagnum moss. So I'm gonna try and cover all the roots, but not submerge, I guess, the stem into the media because I don't want that to rot. All right, so we're gonna throw some more moss on top, all around. Throw some more bark in there somewhere. There we go. Make sure it has some drainage. I'm gonna try and center it as best I can. And then this is the part where I'm gonna kinda decide the height. So, as you can see, the base that this plant had is just under the soil mix. So we're gonna keep it right about there. And then you wanna make sure that these plants are packed in enough to hold them into the pot, but not so tight that they're gonna be constricted and trapped, you know? You want them to be firm in the pot, but not stuck, if that makes sense. Like right now, it's still a little bit wobbly, so I have some leeway. I can pack it a little bit tighter, throw some on there, turn it around, get all the sides. There we go. All right, so see how it's not really going anywhere now? It's not ready to flop out of the pot. I'm just gonna kind of sprinkle on some more bark and perlite. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You're gonna make a mess. Pack that down just a little bit more. And I'm just gonna pack it down enough to give me enough room to do like a top dressing of more sphagnum moss. All right, here we go. And I'm just gonna put like a nice thin layer on. Just go like this, set it on, kind of maneuver it around the plant. You don't wanna cover up the plant or any leaves. You don't want it to be like constantly sitting on wet sphagnum. All right, finish off this top dressing. Oh, we have a pitcher trying to go inside. All right. And then I might just like put some more bark and sphagnum or bark and perlite on top just so that I know that this isn't potted in plain sphagnum moss, just so I know how much to water it and how fast it's gonna dry out. All right, so here we go. Quick and easy. It's in its new home. I'll probably do a little cleanup on it. There's some dead leaves and stuff that have died off. But here we go. On the tag, I will write the month and year that I repotted it just so that I know in the future. And stick that back inside. And then I'll probably give it a good water with RO water. And then this plant should be good to go. All right, so during this repotting, I'm just gonna be kind of explaining general Nepenthes care while I repot the plant because I was talking about how to repot a Nepenthes during the last repotting. So you're just gonna follow along and watch what I'm doing, and then I'm just gonna let you guys know how to take care of your plants, not just repot them. So this one is gonna be Nepenthes wrigleyana. It's a lowland hybrid of sorts. There's the tag for you. Oh, boom. But yeah, again, it looks like this one was a bigger vine at one point, and then it was cut off and the basil was rooted and turned into the new crown. Already a nice sized plant though. It's got one pitcher that's already showing some great qualities. Nice striped peristome, red pattern, and there's a little bit of a pattern on the inside. It's cute. Okay, get down. All right, so I guess let's just get started. So Nepenthes are, as you probably know, a carnivorous plant. And a lot of people don't know that Nepenthes are actually a vine. All of these are kind of younger plants, so they're not quite to the vining stage. Usually when they're first starting out, they kind of tend to be pretty squat. Just because at that point they're just kind of trying to survive. They're just like focusing on making pitchers and catching bugs. But then once they kind of mature a little bit more, you'll start to notice that in between each leaf, the space along the stem gets a little bit longer every time, and the tendrils also tend to get a little bit longer. And that's because at that point in their life, they're starting to either climb up a tree or a branch, whatever they're living near in the wild, and they're just trying to climb up and get more, better real estate, I guess. They are tropical plants, which means that generally they require a little bit warmer temperatures. However, there are highland and lowland Nepenthes along with intermediates that can handle different conditions. The main difference in between highland and lowland Nepenthes is the temperature, and this can actually be quite important, especially when you get into like species and stuff, because species Nepenthes tend to be a little bit more picky with their temperatures and whatnot. As they get hybridized and stuff, they just kind of tend to lose that. They're a little bit more lenient. Of course, they still kind of tend to require the same care as their parents, depending on what species they're a hybrid of. So this one is a lowland hybrid, so I guess we'll just start with lowland care. So lowland Nepenthes, like I said, the main difference in between highland and lowland Nepenthes is the temperature. It took me forever to remember the different care for highland and lowland Nepenthes just because I got confused which one was which. So lowland, they're usually the Nepenthes that live like down in the actual rainforest, like on the forest floor where it's nice and hot and humid all the time. So they usually like temperatures. I keep mine usually anywhere in between, maybe 75 at the lowest during the day, all the way up to, maybe just past 100. They don't mind it. They grow nice and hot, so it doesn't bother them whatsoever. As for light, I try and give my Nepenthes as much light as possible. On this one, you'll kind of see that it has some reddening going on. That's kind of when I back them off a little bit. That's when I know that they're getting sufficient light. There you go, there's the red freckles. That's when I know that they're getting sufficient light, and if you give them any more, they might burn a little bit. So once I get to that point, I just kind of keep them at that light level. As for highland Nepenthes, the main difference in between them, like I said, is the altitude at which they grow. So highland Nepenthes obviously grow at a little higher elevation than lowland Nepenthes, and because of that, they have a little bit different conditions. So they normally like lower temperatures. Now, depending on the species or hybrid, that can be a little bit different and a little bit more specific. But just like a general rule of thumb for highland Nepenthes, I would say probably keep them anywhere in between maybe like 70 as a low for like daytime temperatures, and then maybe all the way up to like 85 or so. That's about the max that they like. Any warmer than that and they tend to struggle a little bit. But there are some rule breakers, obviously, just depending on the species, but these are just like general guidelines. And then things change a little bit, of course, when you get into hybridization. That's how you get like intermediate crosses, is like a highland mixed with lowland. It tends to kind of dull each of the extremes for the care. But like I said, this one is a lowland hybrid, so this one will probably be getting temperatures of 85 all the way up to 100, and it should be happy with that. Now, one thing that's really important, regardless of what Nepenthes you have, is the fact that Nepenthes really love humidity. And humidity is really key, and it's kind of tough for some people to achieve the right humidity, just because unless you're growing in a greenhouse, it's kind of hard to increase the humidity in like a house, especially if you have like air conditioning or central heating, just because both systems really suck out any moisture that's in the air. And so if you're growing these inside, you're probably gonna need a humidifier of sorts, or you're gonna have to grow them all on like a pebble tray just to kind of raise the humidity a little bit. And it's extremely important for these guys because another fun fact about them is that these pitchers, contrary to popular belief, are not flowers. They have an entirely different system for flowering. These are just modified leaves. So there's the leaf, and then you can see the main vein that goes all the way down the leaf, and then it turns into a tendril, and then that tendril connects to the base of the pitcher. So this is really just a modified leaf, and each leaf will grow a pitcher if given the right humidity. And it's that little guy right there that's gonna turn into a pitcher. You can kind of see the pitcher shape already forming. I don't know if I'm gonna get it to focus, but you can already see the pitcher shape kind of forming. And these are very sensitive, especially to humidity and temperature. So the key to getting them to grow pitchers successfully, at least for me, is keeping the humidity as high as possible. Now, like I said, it could be tough to keep the humidity high, especially if you're growing inside. And I found that the easiest way to keep humidity high enough for those little tendrils is either by spraying them, like misting them, or by covering them in some sort of container, dome, something like that, just so that humidity stays extremely high, because they can dry out very fast within a matter of hours if the humidity drops into like single digits or like the teens. So that's what I found to be a key in making sure that they pitcher successfully, along with making sure that the plant itself does not dry out, because Nepenthes do love their moisture, but like I said, they don't like to be sitting in like stagnant, sopping wet sphagnum moss. And I think this repotting is just about done, and I think that's all I really have to share with you guys for Nepenthes care. And this is another Nepenthes potted up. Aren't they just cool plants? Look at that. They're so exotic looking, and that's why I love growing them. The different colors on them, just what a weird plant. Now, if you're kind of becoming interested in growing these plants because they're very rewarding, very interesting, there are some specific kinds that you might want to start with. And the most highly recommendable one is probably the Nepenthes ventrata. It's probably the most common Nepenthes that you're ever going to find. It's usually available at like most garden centers, I mean, depending on where you live. Like I found this one at Lowe's for like $5. It's a good sized plant. It's already got a good little pitcher on it already, and it's got a nice little tubby one starting. Here we go. So this is probably one of the most forgiving Nepenthes out there. It is one that you can definitely grow inside without any problems. Just because, like I said, it's not picky, especially when it comes to like temperature and humidity. They'll normally pitcher regardless of the humidity, as long as it's not extremely low. And they're very forgiving when it comes to watering. I've gone, I don't know, 2 weeks without watering my Nepenthes, my big Nepenthes ventrata, and it was totally fine. They usually will wrinkle a little bit before they kind of die off, and that's usually a good indicator that it really needs some water. There are a lot of Nepenthes that will not give you that, and you'll just find them shriveled up dead one day. So that's what's kind of nice about these, and it makes them a great beginner plant. They're just a very basic Nepenthes, and it kind of just gives you a good feel for if you'd want to continue growing them before you invest in some of the more expensive species and hybrids out there. The pitchers are, cute. They're fairly basic. There's nothing crazy to them, no crazy colors. This isn't a great example. This is pretty green. But when they get bigger and you give them more sunlight, they do get like a nice pink blush to them. But there's no really fancy striping or anything like that that you see in some of the super hybridized ones. And now you will notice that because this one was planted in full sphagnum moss, its roots are very intertwined with like the fibrous moss. And so I am just gonna kind of leave that ball of old sphagnum moss in there just because I don't want to damage any of these roots, because look at how delicate and thin they are. It's just really not worth it to try and pick out every last piece of moss. But yeah, back to repotting. I mean, this is a good sized plant, and this plant is really rewarding because it grows super fast. This is probably one of the fastest growing Nepenthes you're gonna find. I mean, this one, it's pretty vigorous already, you can tell. It's already got some good sized leaves. But in maybe a year or two, it could be, I don't know, this long, already vining with like some nice sized pitchers on it, probably that big. But yeah, let's give it a good size home. It's already a good size plant. There we go. That looks about right. So yeah, we're just gonna go back in, give it some moss. Boom. Boom. Hit it with some perlite and bark. And then maybe some more moss, yeah. Give it a nice comfy little bed. All right, just kind of nestle in that root ball a little bit. Fill it on up. And pack in some more moss just to make sure that it is nice and snug in there. There we go.
But yeah, like I said, Nepenthes, they are just really neat plants. There aren't very many like them. I mean, there are like Sarracenia and stuff, but those are an entirely different thing. They're just, they're normally referred to as like American pitcher plants rather than like tropical pitcher plants, because they do grow most commonly in the Americas. But yeah, those are also another very interesting, very rewarding plant. You should research those if you find these interesting at all. But yeah, let's scoot it over a little bit. Fill that in with moss. Here we go. And top it off a little bit. And then just sprinkle some of this on top just so that I know it's not in pure sphagnum. Wonderful. Alright, and there's a Nepenthes ventrata for ya. Cute little guy. Sorry, my cat's loving playing with all the stakes and plant supplies that I have out, so that's what all those background noises were. But yeah.
And I don't think I'm gonna film the repotting for this one, mainly just because I don't have like an ID for it. But this is a smaller Nepenthes. However, something really great about this, I really wish I had an ID for the hybrid of this, because this one really exhibits some of the key traits that Nepenthes growers look for in their pitchers. It's got some really great striping on the peristome. Look at that, some great oranges, deep reds, candy apple reds. Sorry for the nasty fingernails. It's got some amazing patterns all the way around the pitcher and inside. Look at that pattern. You get to look inside and see that. And these leaves are very squat, very short, and it leads me to believe that there's probably some sort of truncata or Rocantlii in its parentage. And also because of the fact that if you look at the size of the plant, it's only about 3 inches across, and then you look at the size of the pitcher. Let's compare really quick.
So this looks to be the biggest pitcher on this ventrata, but look at how big the plant is. It's probably a 7 or 8 inch leaf span, okay? But the pitcher really is only about 1.5 inches. Now when you look at this one, the leaf is only about 1 inch. The pitcher itself is bigger than the leaf if you look at it. And so that really leads me to believe that this is some great breeding for pitcher size and color along with that. So I'm really excited to see what this one has to offer. And that new leaf right there, I want to see how big I can get that bad boy to be.
So I take back what I said earlier. I actually do have a few more things to share with you guys about Nepenthes, just because they're kind of crazy plants, and there's some more fun facts that I want you guys to know. So this is kind of a good example of like the basic anatomy of a Nepenthes. And there's one thing that I didn't go over that you would normally hear about in a plant care guide, and that's fertilizing. And that's because these guys are a little bit weird. So because they are carnivorous plants, they pretty much catch their own food. And they've kind of adapted that way just because where they live, they don't really receive a lot of nutrients naturally. Whatever nutrients they're gonna get is just gonna be from decaying plant matter, stuff like that around them. So their roots really aren't known for absorbing a lot of nutrients. And that's why they kind of develop these pitchers. And so as you know, the pitchers catch bugs, and once they get big enough, they can catch even like small rodents, lizards, frogs, stuff like that. And they secrete an enzyme, and it's like a liquidy syrup, I guess, that develops in there. It's not just water. And there's an enzyme in there that can digest bugs and plant material, whatever happens to fall in there. And because of that, they kind of fertilize themselves. And a lot of people want to try and fertilize their Nepenthes because they're not necessarily the fastest growing plants. And it's really not the right thing to do because their roots can be easily burned. Like I said, they're very sensitive. And so you really don't want to fertilize your Nepenthes, especially if you're just starting out. You really don't want to worry about it whatsoever. Once you become like a specialized Nepenthes grower, you can get away with it because it's a very touchy task to try and fertilize Nepenthes, just because they really do well on their own. They can create their own food just by any bugs that they catch in there. But like I said, Nepenthes aren't super big on fertilization, and so if you're new to it, don't even worry about it. Don't ever worry about fertilizing your Nepenthes. Just kind of give it the stray bug or fly, whatever you see around the house, and I promise it will do just fine for you. But here's one more view of this guy. Such a pretty plant. Such a pretty plant. Also, just one more quick thing that I didn't really elaborate on very much is the not only the fact that Nepenthes love their water and they love to stay wet all the time, but also they do require a specific, that was easy, a specific kind of water. Nepenthes normally do not like tap water. Most carnivorous plants are really going to benefit from a water that has a very low total dissolved solids in it, which is anything alkaline. They really love to have just pure, good stuff like rainwater, reverse osmosis water, just because all of those metals that are dissolved in the water can very easily burn these plants' roots. They have very sensitive roots. So if that's not something that you can provide for these plants, like very high quality, clean water with very low total dissolved solids, I guarantee they're going to struggle. It's very easy to get very good quality water. Most grocery stores are going to have like distilled water or spring water for sale, either by the gallon or you can use bottled water. I know that's kind of expensive, but I guarantee that it will help with the health of your plants and the health of their roots. Now, I know that I've covered a lot of information, some of it not so important, just fun facts. So I figured I'd recap just one last time as I'm repotting one of these last plants. So key things to keeping your Nepenthes alive. They really love moisture. So whatever mix you decide to put them in, just remember that moisture is key. Lighting, they really enjoy high light. You don't want to burn them, but they enjoy a good amount of light. And remember, you can really kind of gauge that just by looking at your plant. If it has any reddening of the leaves or freckling of any kind, that's how you know that it has sufficient light. And light is also a key in guaranteeing that they pitcher. Because the pitchers are an extension of their leaves, they really thrive on a good amount of light. Humidity is very key in keeping these plants happy and healthy. They need high humidity. These are rainforest plants, and it is very important to them and very important to their pitchering, which is the reason that we grow these plants, is for their beautiful pitchers. Other than that, I mean, if you follow those three main, just kidding. Also temperature. These are tropical plants. They like warm temperatures, and depending on your plant, it can change the temperature range that it needs. So please, 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 buy whatever Nepenthes makes you happy, but make sure that you can give it the proper care, proper temperatures, light, humidity, all that good stuff to make sure that it's happy, because these are beautiful plants, and you really want to make sure that however you're growing them is the best way to keep that plant happy, healthy, and growing for years. Because if you keep these plants in the proper conditions, they will go forever. It's just because they're such an efficient plant and they're really great and rewarding, and I really hope that you guys have some interest in them now. I mean, just look at them. Look at that. How crazy. All right, guys, well, thank you so much for tagging along if you're still listening. I know that I kind of threw a lot of information at you in a not so short period of time, but I mean, there's just a lot to say about these plants. They're just so interesting and rewarding. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't, comment if you have any questions about these plants. I know that they're kind of crazy and I'm sure some questions have been raised about them. But yeah, like, comment, share this video if you feel so inclined, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.